In the village of Wisteria, nestled amidst rolling hills and ancient woods, the sun dipped into the horizon, painting the sky with hues of crimson and gold. The once idyllic scene, however, was now overshadowed by an air of foreboding. Shadows stretched long across cobblestone streets, and a chill that had nothing to do with the season crept through the air. A sense of unease gripped the villagers as they gathered in hushed clusters near their homes, their voices low and trembling. The mysterious disappearances had begun weeks ago, each vanishing, leaving behind only faint traces of a broken lantern here, a trail of disturbed earth there. The cave that loomed over the village, its jagged mouth yawning like some ancient predator, had become the focal point of their fears. No one dared approach it. Even in daylight, it seemed to exude a malevolent presence. Children were hurried indoors before dusk, their laughter replaced by frightened whispers. The village elder, a stooped figure with eyes clouded by age but sharp with wisdom, spoke of old tales, warnings passed down through generations about the cave and what might dwell within its depths. "The mountain keeps its secrets," he would mutter gravely, his words doing little to calm the growing dread. As night fell, and the last rays of sunlight faded into darkness, Wisteria seemed to hold its breath. Doors were bolted, candles burned low, and prayers were whispered into the stillness. Yet, even behind locked doors and shuttered windows, the villagers could not shake the feeling that something unseen watched them from the shadows waiting. A young man, a skilled adventurer with a keen eye and quick reflexes, and a girl, a talented scholar with books in her hands and knowledge in her heart, arrived in Wisteria, guided by stories that had come from faraway lands. Rumors of a mysterious cave and its connection to the disappearances drew them in like a riddle waiting to be solved. Their presence did not go unnoticed. The villagers, exhausted by fear and despair, gathered around them as soon as they set foot in the village. "Please," pleaded an elderly woman in a trembling voice, "help us. Our children, our friends. They are disappearing, and we do not know what to do." The people gathered closer, their faces pale with worry, their eyes shining with a last glimmer of hope. The young man looked toward the cave that dominated the landscape, its dark opening seeming like a threat that permeated the entire village. "We will investigate," he said firmly, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. The girl stood by him, her mind already full of theories and questions. "But we need all the information you have," she added calmly, her voice full of determination. The villagers led them to an old oak tree on the edge of the village, where they told of strange sounds coming from the cave at night, and of the shadows that danced on its walls when the moon was high. Tales of long-forgotten legends now seemed all too real. The young man and the scholar exchanged glances, a mixture of caution and determination. They knew that something unknown, perhaps even deadly, awaited them, but they could not turn their backs on the people who needed them so desperately. As they approached the cave, the air grew heavy, filled with an eerie, whispering mist that curled around their feet like invisible fingers. The young man paused for a moment, gripping the hilt of his sword tighter, while the girl clutched the book to her chest, as if seeking safety in it. They exchanged nervous glances, their eyes telling them what words could not fear and determination fought for. Supremacy in their hearts, but neither was ready to give in. Their footsteps echoed in the silence as they approached the cave's entrance. The dark, open jaw of the rock seemed like a living entity, inviting them inside, but with a menace that was felt in every breath. "Are you ready?" the young man asked quietly, his voice almost muffled by the thick air. "As ready as I can be," the girl replied, trying to hide the tremor in her voice. With the flickering light of their lanterns, they stepped inside. The cave walls were cool and damp to the touch, covered in moss that shimmered in the light like tiny stars. The shadows cast by their lamps danced on the rocks, creating shapes that seemed almost alive. The sounds of water droplets falling somewhere in the distance seemed louder than they should be, while the whisper of the mist grew more pronounced. Words they could not understand. but which raised the hairs on the back of their necks. Step by step, they entered deeper into the unknown, their hearts beating in perfect rhythm, fast and strong. Every moment was filled with tension. Every sound could be a sign of something to come. Yet they did not stop. They knew that the answers lay somewhere in the darkness before them, and despite the fear that permeated them, they were determined to find them. As they ventured deeper into the cave, they came upon ancient ruins, hidden from the light of day for centuries. The air was heavy with the scent of old dust and forgotten knowledge, creating the feeling of having entered a time capsule. The young man and the girl exchanged glances that spoke of awe and wonder, their footsteps echoing off the stone walls as if summoning the spirits that had slept there for centuries. The ruins were covered in layers of dust and moss, but although they were old, they still retained some of their former grandeur. The pillars that supported the roof were decorated with symbols that seemed to come from another world. The girl pressed her hand against one of the pillars, her finger running over the symbols as if feeling them. As the young man surveyed the space, his eyes trying to take in every detail. "This is something I have never seen," the girl said, her voice almost a whisper. "These symbols look like they're from an ancient language I've only read about in books." The young man turned back to her, his lamp illuminating the symbols that seemed to move in the light. "Perhaps these are writings from some ancient civilization," the young man suggested, his eyes shining with excitement. "Those who lived here must have had knowledge far beyond our comprehension." The girl nodded, her mind already working on theories and questions. They walked further through the ruins, each new discovery like a new piece of the puzzle that brought them closer to the truth of the cave and the disappearances. But the deeper they went, the stronger the feeling that they were being watched. It was not clear whether it was just their imagination or something real, but they knew they had to keep going, regardless of the danger that awaited them. Suddenly, they heard a faint whisper, a soft, husky voice that seemed to come from all directions. The young man and the girl turned around, trying to locate the source, but there was no one in sight. The sound was so faint that they had to lean forward to hear it better, but it was still unclear what the voice was saying. The whisper was like a cold wind that passed through their bones, leaving them shivering. The young man clenched his sword in his hand, his eyes searching the space for anything that might be dangerous. The girl stood beside him, her gaze fixed on the darkness, as if trying to see what was invisible. "What is it saying?" the girl whispered, her voice almost inaudible. The young man nodded, trying to hear better. The voice was getting a little louder, but the words were still unclear. It sounded as if it was speaking a language they did not understand, but still had some mysterious meaning that attracted them. As they turned around, the feeling of being surrounded grew stronger. The darkness around them seemed to be forming into shapes that had a life of their own. The young man and the girl stood together, their hands touching, and in that moment they knew they had to keep going. No matter the fear that gripped them, "We must find out what it says," the young man said, his voice determined. The girl nodded, her gaze fixed on the unknown that awaited them ahead. Together they walked further into the darkness, the voice growing louder, and the words beginning to take on a meaning that led them deeper into the secret caves.